Welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's jump right in here. You know, uh, when Donald Trump was running for his third term, I watched quite a few of his rallies. And in those rallies, he would always talk about how on day one, he was going to release the full Epstein files. And of course, we all know that hasn't happened. And the sad part about it, in my mind, is Donald Trump was a victim of the deep state. They wanted not just to destroy him, but his family as well. They wanted him in prison. They wanted to bankrupt him and his companies. And on the right, people have to wake up and realize that's who the current opposition is. It's not your parents' or grandparents' Democrat Party. It's now the Democrat Socialist Party of America. And I know most Americans are having a problem coming to grip with this, but I don't get Donald Trump here in his third term, and I certainly don't get it when it comes to the Epstein files. You know, it's apparent that America does have a multi-level justice system where if you have the money, you can do anything. And, you know, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think the vast majority of people out there are absolutely convinced that a large number of wealthy individuals got a pass in the Epstein files because of who they were. And when Donald Trump was doing all his rallies and he was talking about how on day one he was going to release the information, apparently he didn't know who was in the information. And once he found out, that changed the whole way he looked at it. But it seems so hypocritical to support a multi-level judicial system, or I should say application of the law. And it's not going to bode well for him once he's out of power. Now, hopefully, a Republican succeeds him, but that's not a given. In fact, I don't even know that it's a given that the Republicans will win the midterms. I'd like to hope they will, because I certainly know the Democrat Party is not the answer today. These are radicals. They do not like our country, and they want to change it. And so it seems to me that, to at least some degree, the president has now jumped on that bandwagon. And then we get to this headline today. Why would 15,500 sponsors take 3 or more unrelated, unaccompanied minors? Well, you see, what was the whole thing with the Epstein files? It was the abuse of children. And so Epstein was put in prison, and I'm of the camp that believes he was murdered. And again, I know both Cash Patel and Dan Bongino got super mad that people weren't taking them at their word. And there's a good reason for it. Because it was evident when they released a video and when they said there was no evidence, they were lying to us, because right there in the video, we could see that piece of the orange jumpsuit as somebody was deliberately trying to avoid being on the camera. And of course, we all have to wonder just why were they hiding? Why? What were they going to do? Subsequent to them releasing that video, and it was months later when in the files, we saw where they recognized that piece of orange jumpsuit was actually in the film. But of course, they gave no explanation because they have no explanation, and they're not going to go down that trail. Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. He was murdered so that they can continue with the abuse of minor children. And that's what happened here with the open border. Now, the open border accomplished many tasks, and none of them bode well for this country. And but, and here's the big but, nobody is being prosecuted for any of these crimes outside of Epstein was prosecuted and Ghislaine Maxwell. And I have a problem too with Ghislaine Maxwell because, and I'm really cautious of Trump's nominee now for the DOJ because uh, he was the one who went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, and he said she was really honest. Well, she said that there was no evidence of any further abuse, or there were no other people involved. And I just don't buy that. I don't think anyone else in the public buys it. And yet, interestingly, shortly after that meeting occurred, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to a minimum security prison. And I have no doubt, I have very uh, little doubt that when Donald Trump is at the end of his term and doing his end of term pardons, that we will see that Ghislaine Maxwell will get a pardon. Yet she was quiet. She didn't open up. And of course, you never know. At some point in time, she may decide once again that it's time to reopen her quest for her freedom and maybe come forth with some information. But there are so many big names involved in this, I'm afraid, that I don't think we're ever going to see a stop put to it, at least not anytime soon. And it's shameful because there was so much talk and so much hype, and everyone thought so much was going to happen. But not that much is happening. In fact, I think the Trump administration has somewhat surrendered when it comes to uh, deporting all of the illegals that are here. Because I'm in Southwest Florida, and when I first moved in, you know, we saw signs of it. We read the articles in the paper, our local paper, and I also saw, there's one area in Lake County, um, Palm Beach Boulevard to be specific, that's a haven uh, for illegal immigrants. And, you know, when ICE first started their raids, when you went down there, it was like a ghost town. You had all of these food trucks. And, speaking of food trucks, let me go off on a tangent here. Because before all of this massive illegal immigration into our country, there were limits on what people could do with having a roadside food stand. And they were all heavily regulated. And then come welcome all of the illegals, and many of them, they came here looking to improve their lives, and they started businesses with these food trucks. They were all over the place, and still there are a large number of them, and you're never going to convince me that all these places are being inspected by, because I think most of them are being run sort of, what's that saying, under the table. But and even in a red state, that's allowed. But anyway, getting back. to what I was saying is in the beginning when ICE went out there, it was all these illegals. They found places to hide. They were not going to be outside. But you go back down there now, and they're all back out there. Yes, sir. And now I do know for a fact stories of. Uh, I know certain people who work in certain industries that lost employees, um, and so I know factually that there were these deportations, but it seems like it's all come to a stop. And okay, so maybe they were saying that because of the budget impasse, they couldn't go out there and get the people. But I think that that is merely an excuse, and that for whatever reason, the Trump administration has caved on all of this. And I suspect, yes, one thing that the right and the Republican Party is good for. They are more than willing to tell us about all of the crimes that have been committed. They're in many of the cases willing to tell us who the perpetrators are, but they don't do anything about it. None of these people are ever called to account. You know, I keep going back to this, but I remember early on in the Trump administration when they had that insurrection out in California. And uh, now, in this insurrection, we were able to see the video clips and the still photographs taken of these neat piles of bricks and pallets conveniently placed where, let's say, anybody looking to do some damage could pick them up and throw them at whatever they wanted to throw them at. And in the aftermath, the president himself come out and said the DOJ needs to investigate and find out who is financing this insurrection and charge them accordingly. And what happened there? Crickets. And of course, it's how this all works. If anybody in the press were to ask them a question, the answer is always going to be, "Oh, we don't comment on ongoing investigations." Well, uh, it's an out that they have, and I don't know the only way uh, to get around that would be to take them in court. And fortunately, we do have Tax Watch and others that are out there filing appropriate court actions, but it's still the number of them pale in comparison to uh, actually what should be happening. And this is a big difference between the two parties. The Democrat Socialist Party, boy, when they want to move on something, it's on all cylinders. And don't let anybody in that party object, because that party will take all the necessary steps against that person. And you don't just see that kind of cohesiveness uh, on the Republican side. In fact, sometimes they fight over some of the silliest things, and as a result, they can't get anything done. And, I don't know exactly what the answer is to that, but I know there's this growing problem with the problem with children. And it just seems to me that it's all talk of what they're doing. Now, they're claiming in this article that there were this 15,500 sponsors. Well, unless they were listed as sponsor one, sponsor two, sponsor three, you would think that they would have the names and they can go out there and find them. You would think that. Because I guarantee if people were taking and sponsoring these minors, they were accepting payment for that. And they're probably still collecting the payments because, see, this is all intertwined with the fraud. And I mean, it's so pervasive out there. And where are the Republicans on this? They're nowhere. In fact, Uh, I suggest it was some of the Republican members in the House and the Senate who were partially responsible for the decline of Doge. I mean, Doge was really finding a massive amount of fraud and in our government, and apparently some of that fraud was going to people on the right, and I don't know how we overcome that problem. I'm not even sure it's even possible to overcome it because it's just so pervasive. The corruption, it is so pervasive, and now our government doesn't understand that people are finding it harder and harder and harder to live in this economy. Yeah, they keep talking about how great the economy is doing, but the economy is not doing well. And the war in Iran, I don't. Okay, so now I'm hearing that there's a peace. Peace is going to be at hand, and I guess Donald Trump wants to believe that in his mind he can. In reality, it's just like this ceasefire. You know, words have meaning, and everyone knows what a ceasefire is, and everyone knows that when both sides are firing just about every day, that's not a ceasefire. But we have to play the game and call it a ceasefire, even though it's not a ceasefire. And then we get upset when the left wants to change the definition of words. When they don't like illegal alien, and instead they would prefer undocumented immigrant. It's just sad. Uh, and unfortunately, you have to wonder: do these immigrants realize how many of them are really being taken advantage of? I'm not sure they understand it now. I think that in due course, if they're allowed to stay here, they're going to figure that out, and they're not going to like it. But in the interim, we got this problem, and there's still approximately 300,000 missing minors who surged into this country during the Biden term. Where are these children? Who knows? Are they looking for them? I suppose they're saying they are, but and maybe there are some efforts. I don't want to just say nothing's being done, but you know, if you know they want the sponsors, you should know who the sponsors are. And we should be getting detailed reports. And this is something that the Republican Party is terrible at. They're really terrible at disseminating information to their constituents. And sadly, the American voter overall is not paying enough attention to all of the major issues to be an educated voter going into the polls. So most of them are just going in there and based on family ties or whatever, hitting whichever the D or the R or whatever. And I'm not sure at this juncture our country can continue with that. You know, the Democrats or the Democrat Socialists of America, they've made clear what they plan on doing if and when they are able to once again have all three branches of the government. Let's hope it doesn't happen because that's the end of the country. And so, in my eyes, in order for this country to continue moving forward, sort of as it was founded, the real election's going to be in the Republican primaries. And Republican voters, look, they're either going to have to start following the issues and voting accordingly, or they're going to realize that the country's lost. And just because your particular representative brings back the bacon to your district is not a good enough reason to keep reelecting them. In fact, voters should be electing those who are cutting the bacon because this country, we cannot keep borrowing at the levels that we are. And none of the politicians seem willing to move in there and step in there and say, we got to fix this. Look, they're now saying that Social Security will be unable to pay the benefits in 5 years, 2032, maybe 5.5, 6 years, maybe max. That's not a lot of time. And every day now that goes by that they don't fix it means that when they actually do fix it, it's going to be that much more egregious. And I don't know exactly what the fix is for Social Security. I think it's going to take, a couple of actions. They may need to increase, and I hate to say that, but increase the amount that they're collecting, and they may have to raise the retirement age. I'm not sure exactly what they have to do, but I'll say this, none of the politicians are willing to even discuss it, let alone vote on it. So it's not going to happen, and so it doesn't bode well for this country. Well, I think I've ranted enough for today, and so I'm going to close this session. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below. I'd love to answer any questions anybody might have. With that, you all have a great day. Stay safe. It's a crazy world out there, and it certainly gets crazier by the day. Bye-bye.